Welcome. A very warm greetings to all. Thank you for joining us again for another Pariyatti Presents event. My name is Briha Sarathi, and I'm here on behalf of Pariyatti as its Executive Director. We're grateful that you've all joined us today. For those of you who are not already familiar with Pariyatti, we're a non-profit charitable organization based in the USA. Our mission is to enrich the world by disseminating the words of the Buddha, providing sustenance for the seeker's journey, and illuminating the meditator's path. Pariyatti imports books from around the world, reprints books, publishes new titles, and converts existing material into digital formats. We protect and provide an enormous catalog of Dhamma resources in many languages and formats that otherwise would not be as easily available. We offer many free resources such as the Pariyatti Learning Center, the Treasures of Pariyatti, Dhamma Storytime, and Daily Words for Inspiration via email, RSS feeds, and our mobile app. We offer most audio and video material, as well as many eBooks and audiobooks free of charge, including a large number of resources for students of SN Goenka. We also organize donation-based residential Pāli workshops and facilitate pilgrimages for Vipassana meditators. For more information on Pariyatti, please visit our website at pariyatti.org. Please note that in order to ensure a seamless experience for our audience, we've chosen to pre-record this introduction as well as a subsequent conversation with Rivers Cuomo. So for today's event, Kory Goldberg will be interviewing Rivers Cuomo. Rivers is best known as the lead vocalist, guitarist, keyboardist, and songwriter of the Grammy Award-winning band Weezer. He founded Weezer in 1992. The band's self-titled debut album was released in 1994 to massive critical and commercial success. Following the multi-platinum album, Rivers enrolled at Harvard University, where he studied before dropping out to record Weezer's 1996 album, Pinkerton. He would return to Harvard in 1997, as well as 2006, where he ultimately graduated with a degree in English. In addition to Weezer's 15 studio albums and 20+ million album sales globally, Rivers has worked on several other projects, including 2 solo albums and a joint project with Scott Murphy titled Scott and Rivers. He's also been featured as a vocalist on songs with B.O.B., Avalanches, Steve Aoki, and more. His song Backflip is the theme song for Netflix's Green Eggs and Ham animated series. Rivers is also a Vipassana meditator in the tradition of SN Goenka. So today, Rivers is being interviewed by Kory Goldberg. Kory has a PhD in religious studies from the University of Quebec in Montreal, and he teaches ethics and critical thinking, religion, and sustainability at Champlain College in Saint-Lambert, Quebec. He co-authored Along the Path, The Meditator's Guide to Pilgrimage in the Buddha's Land, and is the general editor of the Pariyatti Journal, as well as a Vipassana meditator in the tradition of SN Goenka. So without further ado, I give you Rivers and Kory.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you today, Rivers. I'm a fan of your music, and I like what you do, and I've heard a lot about you over the years from different, I think we have a lot of mutual friends, mutual colleagues, so it's cool that we finally get a chance to talk.
Yeah,
so,
I'm excited too.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So I heard that you grew up on an ashram. Can you just tell us what that was like, and can you just tell us about it?
Yeah, my parents met at the Rochester Zen Center in 1968, and we kind of were based there until I was about 4 or 5, and then we moved from there to the Satchidananda Ashram in Connecticut. They've since moved down to Yogaville in Virginia. But it was, as far as I know, it was like a real Indian-style ashram, and you know, it was all vegetarian, lots of volunteer work, and we had our own school there, so I went to school there too. And part of the daily curriculum was hatha yoga and mantra meditation. So that was my childhood, and it was pretty sweet.
Cool. And so did you, how long were you at that ashram for?
Well, we were members of that ashram probably from 75 to 81. And after that, I went to, they moved to Virginia, and we kind of stayed in Connecticut and transferred over to public school in 6th grade.
Yeah, so how was that? Like, was it hard to transfer from like this alternative spiritual community to the public system?
Yeah, I mean, I think middle school is hard for most kids, but yeah, we were both excited and nervous and struggling to adjust. I mean, I remember being super excited that we were going to have like our own desk, and we were going to have school colors and sports teams. All that just seemed so exciting and like normal America and fun. And I remember like we we wanted to learn how to swear. So even at the ashram, our last days there, we're all just trying to swear so we could fit in. But yeah, it was cool. Also, when we get there, feeling like we were different from everybody in a way, and I always felt like this is just maybe with growing up with meditation. There's always part of my mind was a little bit detached and a little bit more careful about, I don't know, just reacting. So I always valued that background, even from my first days in mainstream America.
Yeah, it's a privilege to have that foundation. So then what brought you to Vipassana? Can you tell us the story about how you came to your first course?
Yeah, well, I growing up, I mean, after we switched to public school, I stopped all kinds of yoga and meditation. All that. I mean, it was there when I needed it in some kind of emergency, like, oh, I should, do my mantra. I'm super scared right now or something, but not very often at all. And then I became musician, and somewhere along the line, I got the idea into my head that meditation is kind of like the last thing you need to do as an artist. And I was always drawing on my troubles and my mental imbalances and the things that got me upset. That's what inspired me. So I figured, like, I just got to stay away from meditation. But that my inspiration ran its course, and after a while, I was completely out of ideas and just getting into all kinds of troubles and lawsuits and breakups and all kinds of drama, and it was just felt like I had nothing left to give as an artist. The well was dry. But I happened to be working with a producer for the first time named Rick Rubin, who is very into spiritual practice himself, and worked with him for a few months before one day he just sent me a message on those Blueberry things, those little text message gadgets. He got me one. And he talked to all his artists that way, so you never knew when you're going to get a message from him. But this message was, "Why don't you? Have you ever thought about trying meditation?" And I texted him back, and I was like, "That's the worst idea I ever heard." But it
Did he
kind of,
have the big beard and long hair at the time?
oh yeah, he looked like a legit guru,
Yeah.
and in a lot of ways he was. He's helped me out a lot. Um, but I don't know. Another couple weeks went by, and I just couldn't get off the ground as an artist again, or as a human being, and I felt like I had tried everything. So it just started to click. Like one day, I think I was just really, really upset, and I sat down and started doing some meditation again, and got up and felt clear. So I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a try, and I just started looking around for a teacher and tried a couple different things in quick succession. But then one day somebody suggested Dhamma.org, and I went there, and just looking at the website, I was like, that's it. I'm in for life. All I needed was to read the Code of Discipline and just catch the general vibe of how serious this was, and how it wasn't about lighting incense or like having some kind of peak experience. It was going to be hard work, and I got a, what was the book? By William Hart,
The Art of Living?
Art of Living. Yeah, so I read that. This was like 2006 2003.
Is that a book Rick Rubin gave you?
No, no, he didn't turn me specifically on to Vipassana or Goenka. It's this meditation in general. And so I read through that book, and I was trying to keep my objectivity before I went into my first course. But I just had this feeling like this is it. And in fact, before I went to my first course, I signed up for my second course, which is like a few days after the first one ended. And I like, if something's weird, I can just cancel. But I made it through, and day 10, Metta is, just sobbing, was so moved by the whole experience, and just went course after course right after that.
Great. Yeah. We're lucky when we have people in our lives who can put us in the right direction. And seems like you kept good company. Rick Rubin is, for those who don't know, he's one of the great music producers in the US. And I think in Time they said he's one of the 100 most influential people of our time. So very, very cool that you got to work with him, and he also got to be part of your healing process or spiritual process. That's really neat. And, yeah, good. Yeah, and you're lucky you got to do 2 courses in a row, because I know in Quebec, 1 course every 6 months, because it's long lineups to do a course. So it was a little different back then.
Yeah, I don't think they had come up with that rule yet.
Yeah. So what year was that, did you say?
2003.
2003. Okay.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
Yeah, nice. That was in California?
Yeah, that was at a temporary site in Joshua Tree outside of LA here.
Yeah. So I imagine you have a really busy schedule filled with touring and rehearsals and songwriting and responding to fan mail and raising your kids. So to what extent do meditation and service fit into your life? How do you balance all of that?
I'm not really that busy. I do the 2 hours a day, and on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, I do a couple hours of remote service. I'm part of the Dhamma.org mobile app team.
Oh, nice.
It's been so incredibly fun, and I love working with those people. And then I do a 10-day every year. So, but it's not because I'm busy that I can't do more sitting. It's because I have kids, and until they were like, I don't know, 6 or 7 maybe, I was still doing long courses, but it was excruciating. I mean, obviously it's excruciating anyway, but I just felt so bad about having my kids at home, to the point where I couldn't do the long courses anymore. So I'm doing 10 days for now, and the plan is once they grow up and move out, then I'll go back to the long courses.
How old are they now?
My daughter's 16 and is driving around on her own, and my son is 12. One other thing I think that has helped a lot is we have so much support here. My wife's sister lives with us, and my parents live next door to us. Additionally, when the kids were younger, we had nannies, and people I knew from Dhamma service. We'd hire them to come work in our home, and it just always felt like there was a really strong team around. So if I skip out for 10 days, I know everyone's totally fine without me.
Yeah. Oh, they're really lucky to have that Dhamma vibe around them.
Yeah.
Have your kids done the children's courses?
When my daughter was 8, I took her to a children's course, but she hasn't done it since, and I've never taken my son.
Yeah. You can't force them. It's just, it has to come from them, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Can't imagine they'd get anything, or anyone would get anything out of it if they were forced to be there.
That's definitely true. So, I'm curious when you're meditating, does your creative muse visit you when you're on the cushion? Is a lot of your music written while, during your sittings or during a course? Do you have those kind of creative urges while you're meditating, and do you find them distracting if you do?
uh, yes. I I definitely get a lot of ideas and feel that uh, anxiety of like I gotta somehow remember this because it's such a good idea. I don't want to forget it, and I'm going to be here for another 35 days or something. Um, I'd say that it's gotten less troublesome, um, but yeah, it still happens.
Yeah. And so do you feel that, like you were saying that, you're looking for those experiences. So do you feel that meditation really robs you from that existential angst that's usually associated with good songwriting? Or is it helping you, um, in other ways?
Well, it's definitely helping me in so many ways. It's also definitely robbing me of existential angst. Now, I don't know. I feel like I'm still doing good work, but it's subjective, and who am I to say? I don't know. I don't know who to ask, but I don't feel qualified to answer.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you're satisfied with your music, that's all that counts.
Yeah, I mean, how satisfied can you be with Anicca? It's all just passing. I'm sure whatever feelings I have about it are just going to fade away or change into something else. So try not to think about it too much.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's when the suffering comes in, when we identify with these things, whether it's our songs or our kids or the way we look, our intelligence. It's anytime we identify with these things, that's a real root cause of dukkha.
Hmm.
Yeah. And do you still find do you find songwriting or performing music, is it cathartic for you?
Yeah, it can be. Uh, yeah, it can feel like therapeutic to express some kind of problem that's been going on in your head, and you articulate it very clearly and share it with the world, and you see that other people get it, and they're like, yeah, I know what you mean, or even if they seem moved and they're applauding, it's a great feeling, which
Hmm.
passes away.
Nice. Um, and do you think, has your approach to music evolved alongside your Dhamma practice? So as you've been moving away from, breaking Shila and all these things, like, has it evolved? Has the music evolved, your attitude towards it or your approach towards it, alongside the Dhamma practice, or are they just completely separate things?
Well, they're pretty separate. But I do feel like I'm just way more flexible, and I wouldn't say that it's introduced a lot of new tools into my toolbox, but it's given me the flexibility to be like, oh, you know what, this hammer's not working, so I'm going to pick up a screwdriver, and that's cool. Like
Hmm.
I'm just way less gripping as I'm trying to write a song. It's just like, oh, something's not right, but just chill out for a minute and try something else.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I noticed on your album, OK Human, you don't play guitar on that album. I think you're playing mostly piano.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's my favorite album of yours. Um, and so I guess that's where we can see the flexibility. If you're so used to playing one instrument on every album and you identify with that, and then, you have the confidence to just try a new instrument and do something completely different. Would you? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I love that album, and it's it was super fun to do something that was so different for me.
Yeah.
It was nerve-wracking preparing that one for a live performance. We did it with the Los Angeles Philharmonic at Disney Hall downtown here in LA, and I'd never played piano on stage before, so it was nerve-wracking, but kept meditating,
Yeah. Yeah.
got through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you like conscious of your breath or your sensations while you were on stage? Or once you're on stage, it's like it's only the music and that's all that counts.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like at this stage, having set so many courses, sat so many days at home, like I feel like there's always a part of my mind that's aware, like, oh, I'm feeling that. It feels really good, or that feels really terrible. Usually it's one or the other on stage. Um, Sometimes I get carried away, but uh, and sometimes I'm conscious, like, oh, I better do a little bit of anapana here. I'm totally losing it. I did that 2 days ago when I was playing pickleball. It's our new band sport. We play all four of us, and sometimes wives too, and it can get very heated, and I get so into it, and I can tell sometimes I just start like overreacting and swearing and getting mad at myself. So I just remember, like, right here, just feel that in between plays, just right here, and
Yeah.
yeah, totally chill out and get myself back on track. I find that playing in the middle of sports or playing on stage, my concentration is already super strong from the meditation of playing music or sports. So it's easy for me to just lock on right here. So the sensations are so clear.
And so just talking about, following this idea of anxiety, it's said that public speaking or performing in front of an audience could be one of the scariest things a person can do. And one of the forms of service that I do is I review some of the mental health applications or I review forums on day zero. And I'm always a little surprised, or less surprised now, but at first I was really surprised how often I came across musicians who would say that performing on stage would cause them lots of anxiety or even panic attacks. And there was a considerable number of musicians who actually gave up the profession because of this anxiety or panic attack and stress. Um, so is this, I mean, so you kind of addressed a little bit of the stage fright, but do you still get stage fright? And do you see people around you other musicians getting stage fright? And do you help them out, or are you able to work with them with that?
I I don't quite identify with the term stage fright as much anymore, but there's definitely like a pretty intense neurological response to knowing that I'm going to go out on stage. I guess that's stage fright, but it's more like something that builds up over the course of a tour, that your nervous system never really gets to relax because there's another show coming up the next day, and then all day it's just building up and up, and over the course of 6 weeks of that, it can be pretty debilitating. Even if, as you're literally walking on stage, you don't say to yourself, wow, I have stage fright, or I'm feeling butterflies. It's just like on a very deep level, it's kind of terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've become aware that kind of everybody's going through it, all my bandmates, and even if it on the outside they say they're fine, I think it just wears on everybody. And we know what we're doing, so there's not really any danger there, but in a sense it's kind of like skydiving every night, or something that seems kind of dangerous, walking out in front of 10,000 people, and you have the specific routine of muscles firing, and you got to remember the lyrics, and you have to be present and fun and exciting, and you have to enjoy it, and you have to
even if you don't feel like it.
Yeah, you have to look people in the eyes, and you have to connect, and it's a lot.
Have you turned your band members onto meditation at all?
I remember, I think in 2003, after my first course or two, like we would have band meetings, and I would say like, all right, you guys want to meditate before we start? And they were into it.
Okay.
And next course, they filled out the application. It said something like, have you been teaching anybody else? And I said, oh yeah, just my bandmates. I just kind of show them the basics. And of course I get a call from the AT the next day. Don't do that. So that put a stop to that. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess they're on their own path, and I don't need to introduce this teacher pupil relationship in my band. It's not gonna help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Has your practice like shifted something in the way you relate to your band members?
I think they would be the better people to ask. It's easy for me to say, yeah, I treat them a lot better. I'm a lot better at communicating, but I think you'd have to ask them, see what they say. And it's hard for me to separate, like, what positive changes am I seeing due to all the meditation and the practice, compared to what progress have I made just by growing 20 years older, by being married and being in a relationship and going to couples therapy, and just living and learning. I think I've gotten a tremendous amount from the practice.
Yeah. It is sometimes, it is difficult to say, to pinpoint exactly, oh yes, this is from the practice, because we have like you said, we're getting older. We have so many things going on in our lives.
And I feel it not just year by year, but I feel it every time I sit. Like, at the end of the day, I could be really upset about something, and then I sit for an hour, and it just dissolves, and it's like, oh yeah, like, that's not really that important. Let's work this out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Coming back to Sheila. So I have a few friends who are rock musicians and professional musicians, and they've done a course or two, and they have a hard time really keeping their Sheila. I guess that just maybe comes along with the lifestyle. What advice would you give to them?
Well, I don't know what their specific problems are. I don't know. It's super hard, I guess. From even before I took my first course, I was like, if this is what I think it is, I got to get into these long courses. I don't care what I have to do. And so the day I came out of my first course, I just took a vow right there, like, I'm sticking to these 5 precepts from this day on so I can get into that 20-day course as soon as possible. I want to get in there in the minimum time, 2 years. So that's really what motivated me, was the requirement to get in the long course is you have to keep the precepts. So it was relatively easy for me because I had that determination. Of course, I was 33 at this point, so I think it's a different story if you're like if you're a college kid. Yeah, it's got to be tough. I will say, I don't think intoxicants are going to help with creativity, especially songwriting, but again, it's subjective. So maybe some people like that kind of music. For me, the more sober I am, the better the music is. I think a lot of people, for some reason, they think drugs like open up your mind to enhance creativity, but to me, it doesn't sound enhanced. It just sounds drugged, and in my case, it is definitely far inferior.
Yeah. So I once heard Goenkaji tell a musician that he should try practicing metta while playing. Is this something you've ever tried, especially in front of big crowds?
I think very early on is 2005. This is when we were first album back after getting into Vipassana. First music video back after getting into Vipassana was for our song Beverly Hills. And I tried just that as we were shooting the video. There's a moment where I'm just giving metta to the camera and to millions of people watching on MTV. And I remember at the end of the day, my manager came up to me and said, like, what were you doing in that shot? That was weird. So, and I looked at it, and you can see it in the video. It's there. And it's like, yeah, that's me giving metta, but it doesn't really make sense in the context of Weezer playing at the Playboy Mansion singing the song Beverly Hills. So from that day on, I haven't used that too much. Like, yeah, I definitely think very positive thoughts on stage. And before I go on stage, some of them resemble our metta phrases, and some are more specific to that crowd or the show we have to play. But yeah, just repeating those positive thoughts can really help. But on stage or in a music video, in a way, you're playing a role, and it's not necessarily the role of like this enlightened being or something. I'm playing this archetype.
Sure. Well, I mean, as a lay practitioner, we should, we can find people practicing Dhamma in every single walk of life, whether it's music or sports or academia or blue collar work or even the military.
Yeah.
We infuse whatever we do with the Dhamma. Yeah. I think I did talk to that musician afterwards. He was a violin player. And for him, it wasn't so much about repeating thoughts. It was more like the feeling, infusing sort of the sensations, and practicing metta that way, filling the sensations with metta and then directing them towards the person or the people involved. I can imagine repeating phrases would get distracting.
Yeah, I would do that before we go on, for sure.
Yes.
I think being on stage it's far more technical than most people imagine.
I guess for music, you need a lot of concentration. And I guess somebody like you who's practiced for hours and hours, at least at some point in your life on a daily basis, you develop a lot of concentration. Do you think that's made the meditation practice, Anapana or Vipassana, or even Metta, you think that's made it easier? by all the concentration you've learned to develop through your profession or training to be a musician?
Well, it certainly didn't hurt, but I wouldn't say I'm like a classically trained musician who spent several hours every day growing up doing very difficult, focused mental work.
Hmm.
I was just like a kid in a rock band.
But how many hours, like how often would you practice? Like if you're rehearsing for a tour or
Oh,
uh
now?
in the early days, like even before Weezer, when you were just, learning to master the guitar, I'd imagine you have to be practicing quite a bit. No?
I don't really know. I have I think if you asked me back then, I probably would have said I practiced a lot, but I don't know. I don't have a great sense of what was going on back then. I know I didn't have a tremendous amount of discipline to do hard things. So maybe I was playing a lot, but it was something that absorbed me naturally, and it didn't require any kind of video. It's just
Hmm. Hmm.
easy concentration.
Easy, yeah, sure.
Wish it
Well, I
was,
mean,
I wish
if
it
we
was
do
all
some,
like that.
yeah, I guess when we do anything we love, then, time flies.
Yeah.
Um, what's it like to hear your own songs on the radio, or you're at a show and you hear all these fans, see all these fans singing your songs? Are you able to keep your ego in check, or do you see Mara, raise its head and play all these games with you?
It's very pleasant. And yeah, the practice is to recognize that that's a very dangerous situation. And sometimes I recognize that, sometimes I don't.
Yeah. And I mean, similarly, like when you see reviews, whether it's a good review, album review, or a bad review, or there's Instagram trolls, or seeing your records on the charts, is it hard to hear a bad review, or are you able to just let it slide off of you?
Yeah, it's unpleasant.
But do you react?
Yeah, well, I find that a not very helpful practice. I don't see a huge benefit in exposing myself to negative reviews, and so my general policy is I just don't look at it. And
Mhm.
if I'm just sniffing around online or something, and I have like a radar for like, oh, people are judging my work, whether it's good or bad. I just surf on to the next page or whatever. I just don't need to see it.
Hmm. Oh, that's great. That's great. Um, so when you go to the center, how do people treat you at the center? Are you able to escape your rock star status when you're there?
I wish I could spend more time there. So I did a lot more serving of courses in the early years, and that was so powerful and meaningful. Um, and yeah, for the most part, I I don't bring it up. Nobody else brings it up, and I guess most of the time they don't even know who I am, or sometimes they do, and it's just not an issue. A few times people have brought it up, and it's been cool. Like I find out they're a musician, and I don't know, it's something for us to talk about. It's always nice to get respect. Um, Again, more pleasant sensations that you have to be wary of.
Yeah.
On a few occasions, something a little bit unfortunate's happened, but that's only happened once or twice, and I get it. I mean, they're going through their thing, and they're getting excited, and um, but apart from that, it hasn't been an issue.
Hmm. Hmm. Oh, great. And similarly, how do you negotiate being a public figure with the Buddha's teaching of no self? Is that something you think about?
Um, I don't really think about being a public figure. I don't. I'm just. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Am I a pub? What does that mean? Like, I've and because I've been one since I was 23. I don't know what it would be like to be in any other state. I think we all have the same challenge of feeling those pleasant sensations when our self-image gets a little shine, as Goenka says, or the pain when it's shattered. Maybe it's a little more exaggerated on both ends of the spectrum for a public figure. I'm not sure, but I think we all have to deal with the same thing. And yeah, I think once you renounce that may all get a lot simpler.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you as somebody who has like, a very large fan base, have you turned people on to meditation? Is it something do you encourage people, or do you just sort of take off a hands approach and say, this is what I do, and if people, follow in your footsteps, they do. If they don't, they don't. Like, do you get feedback from people saying, oh, I came to Vipassana, or I started meditating because of you? Is that something you get?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm actually reminded of how Goenka always says, whenever you try to thank him for anything, he says, "Don't thank me, thank the Dhamma."
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. Like, I didn't do anything. Like, it's just, if you're inspired to go walk this very difficult path, it doesn't really say anything about me.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that, of course, early years, I think I talked about it a bit more and maybe a little bit more passionately in the press, in interviews, and those interviews didn't ever come out the way I imagined they would. And some of them were, it's painful to read. They turned me into some kind of freak or something, and or they just, they're just not interested in it. And so I kind of went the other way, and it's like, well, somebody wants to know about it, they'll keep asking, and otherwise I'm just not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And at one point, a senior AT, contacted me and had seen an interview I did where I was quite closed off about it, and just, gave me a little encouragement, like, you can say something. So as always, trying to find a middle path. But I will say that there is extremely little interest out there in this part of my most important part of my life, in the people that interview me, and presumably the people who would be reading it. Is just, the interest isn't there.
Yeah. Or maybe the interest isn't there at first, but then something gets sparked and there's a curiosity for, who knows? We have no idea how, what is the catalyst that brings us to the Dhamma. Like,
Yeah.
who would have ever thought that, Rick Rubin, your music producer, would have like just suggested meditation, and that you followed through with that suggestion, and boom, your whole life has changed.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's who knows. So speaking about like reading and or listening, a song I really enjoy of yours is "Grapes of Wrath," and I sometimes I wonder if that's the only song ever written about reading books or listening to books.
Huh.
I've been really trying to think, like, what other song is there about reading books? I can't think of any, actually. Maybe there's a reference to some poet, but like your whole song is about just these different classics, which is kind of neat and original. And so I'm wondering, are there any specific books which have had a transformative impact on your way of seeing and relating to the world?
Well, kind of everything you read does a little bit, right? One book that nobody knows that kind of had a bigger influence on me was Goethe's Conversations with Eckermann. It's all it is like a transcription of these conversations between Goethe and his assistant towards the end of his life. But he gets into all the stuff about how to be an artist and how to be creative, and especially how to do that as you get older. And so I read that in my late 20s, and a lot of it still sticks with me today. I wouldn't recommend it though.
Nice. Are there any, do you have any favorite Dhamma books?
Yeah, there was the one that came out 5 or 10 years ago about all the stories of people dying of their death.
The Art of Dying?
Yeah, that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good to get a sneak preview of reality.
Yeah. Yeah, that it was very inspiring. Some of those stories were very inspiring. And did it help you understand death better? Or like, have you been around, have you been part of that process with somebody while they were dying? Is that what made you find meaning in that book?
No, I haven't been with someone over the course of weeks or days when they were dying, and maybe that's why this book was so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Get to see what it was like in that very last stage,
Mm-hmm.
in such a balanced way. The stories are told in such a balanced way.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, service is such an important part of the practice, whether it's serving on a 10-day course, but also just as like we learn to meditate at home, there's also many ways in which people serve from home. So you had mentioned earlier that you were part of the mobile app team. You helped out. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so strangely, at age 45, I started just learning how to code a little bit as a hobby while on tour, and there's a lot of downtime, and I really enjoyed it. So eventually I realized, hey, like Dhamma.org has this website and these apps, and maybe there's something I can do service-wise, long distance. And I contacted the people, and they took me in, and for the first 2 years, I think mostly I just listened in on these Zoom calls and had no idea. I didn't understand anything they were saying, but I slowly picked it up, and yeah, probably 6 hours a week now. I'm working on fixing bugs and adding little features to the Dhamma.org app and the children's app, and I love the work, and I love the people, and I love that I'm able to do a little bit of service wherever I happen to be around the world, and or on my own schedule. So yeah, you might think of some skills or interests you have and see if there's some way you can give along those lines. It's super rewarding. I served on the Southern SCBC Trust for a few years, and went out there before the center was built and watched the whole thing come to life. Is really cool. And I learned a lot too. Like, man, I didn't even know what a Google Doc was, and you have to learn all these new skills on the job, and it can really help you in your daily life.
Yeah, so that's cool that you learned how to do some of that technical work through serving. And I seem to remember somebody mentioning that you were involved in the Dhamma Brothers film.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do much.
Okay.
I just provided some of the financial backing.
Okay.
Yeah, as they'd contacted me before they were finished. It was relatively early on, and they would just send me versions of it, and I just offered to help out because it seemed like such a cool project.
Okay. You didn't do any of the soundtrack, some of the music for that?
No, not that I remember, but I think I may have helped them get the rights to some of the music.
Oh, okay.
Forgot about that.
Yeah. And did you do did you do the guitar? There's the children's course film. What's it called? I'm drawing a blank on the name. The
Right.
children,
I do remember sending them some music, and I think some of it was used.
I believe Marta Van Patten made that children's course film,
Yeah.
and then in the credits it said music by Rivers Cuomo, and
Oh,
then
there you go.
because I think I heard you say in one interview that you were hoping to retire by the age of 60, and I think it was I don't remember where it was, but I remember hearing you say it, or maybe I read it somewhere, that you were hoping to retire by the age of 60 and dedicate the rest of your life to just sitting and serving. Is that still a goal for you?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a goal. It's just kind of like the very lightly penciled in plan that I've had since I took my first course, really. And we'll see what happens. My wife may have other plans. Who knows? There's going to be a Nietzsche, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, what would I say? Like, pretty simple. Like, if you can just do those 2 hours every day and your 10 days every year, it's a good path, and stick with it. And the usual thing about service, if you haven't tried it yet and you're thinking that sounds lame, or I want to focus on myself or whatever, just try it. It's incredible. You get so much out of it.
Great. Thanks for sharing all your stories and experiences, Rivers.
Right on.
So thank you so much, Rivers and Kory, for joining us today. On behalf of Pariyatti, I would like to thank all of you for attending this event. As a small, resource-limited nonprofit organization, we rely on volunteers to help us wherever possible. And today's event would not have been possible without the generous support of Tina Savla and Chandra Gupta. So thanks again for your help. As always, it's much appreciated. Thank you.